to the No State Project live from the fortified compound in Mesa, Arizona for this January 27, 2018. Glad to be with you here on the Liberty Radio Network, that's LRN.FM, and streaming also on my YouTube channel. So keep in mind, we are really close to getting 10,000 subs, so you know what to do. I'm going to start doing a stream twice a week now on the YouTube channel here. So in addition to the Wednesday broadcast, I will be streaming the show here today. We have all new bumpers, so there's not an issue on a copyright claim. But I will be pulling down the entire live stream anyway, because even though it's supposed to be an HD stream, but it never looks that way. It always looks. Anyway, I will be reposting another video regarding today's show with the good audio and with graphics and whatnot. So that helps. So when it's something I'm talking about on the show, then I'll throw the graphics up so we give a little more context and a little more information that we can't necessarily jam into a 3-hour broadcast. But it is a 3-hour broadcast. It is 3 hours of Anarchy Radio right here, as we do twice a week here on my YouTube channel now. Yeah, I'm glad to be able to do that. And by anarchy, meaning no rulers, no rulers. Fancy that. Some of us actually use our brain and we reject the ridiculous concept of a ruling class or the necessity to have a violent ruling class. And for that, some of us have been accused of being crazy and having psychological avals. So I will get to that in just a moment. But we reject that concept because the idea that it's okay to lie, steal, kill, and cheat people for no other reason than you call yourself a government, no, we reject that. We believe that the principle of do no harm, that, dare I quote it, live honestly, injure no one, give every man his due, applies to everybody. These are the basic principles that should govern our lives. Yes, they are moral principles, which are not subjective as people would think. As I mentioned on the show before, our morals come from the fact that we have empathy, and that is measurable. You can see the part in the brain that lights up when you are experiencing empathy, that you're feeling pain when you see somebody else in pain. You can it actually causes your own suffering to at least not to the same degree, but to a lesser degree. So that's the basis of why we talk about that, of morality, of live honestly, injure no one, give every man his due, because it's based off of that empathy. Because we shouldn't like to see other people get hurt, unless of course they have it coming to them. Someone like this Cheryl Hardy, which let me give out the numbers here. It is, hey, take them to Detroit. I appreciate people tuning in from Detroit. Our friend Richard Noble is from there, and even though I don't have much information, I don't have any really information. I think Terry is in. We had a habeas corpus that we were able to use number last year to get him out. I don't know if we need to do that again. I've not heard from Terry's son, so I don't know. But the numbers, if you want to join me on the big show here today, of course, is 218-632-9399. 218-632-9399. The passcode is 2020 with the pound sign. You can also get me on Skype at FrankRizzo3. Please, if you want to join the show that way, instant message me first, and I will bring you up on a break. So we have some semblance of professionalism here on the big broadcast. Okay, so that's Frank Rizzo 3. So the idea that the fact that we don't accept a ruling class, the logic behind it, and we use that going into court, and that we don't allow sacred cows. This is going to cause some problems for a very small percentage of us, but we're going to get more information regarding this real soon, because just for those who aren't following the show too close, our friend Bao in Texas, the criminal Cheryl Hardy, and we have pictures of her on markstevens.net. She will be the focus of another video I'm doing regarding the tyranny spotlight. It wasn't enough that just because Bao was asking if jurisdiction was an element of the charge, which of course it is, it wasn't enough for her to hold a peaceful man not accused of any harm without bond. So incarceration just wasn't enough. She had to do what's known as gaslighting, and gaslighting is when you is a mental manipulation. You try to make someone think that they're crazy because of what they believe. And ordering a psych evaluation, that's pretty neat, that's some pretty high-end gaslighting, and very few people have the, comparatively speaking, have the ability to be able to do that. So just asking if jurisdiction, or even just challenging jurisdiction in most cases, is enough with some of these people to trigger a very visceral response from them, and that they will actually, on the surface anyway, the facade is that they're questioning your sanity. So there's Dr. Barry Norman was scheduled to give a psychological evaluation to Bao on Wednesday, right after the Wednesday broadcast. And I don't know what happened. I don't have an update on that. I'm sorry. Maybe somebody can Skype me here during the big broadcast and they can tell me what the hell, what's going on as far as Bao and the psychological exam. So as far as I know, I'm sure if he was out, somebody would have told me. So as far as I know, he's still in, and we got to get, someone mentioned that the habeas corpus was filed and there may have been a hearing today. I don't know if they're going to do a habeas corpus hearing on Saturday. It would be nice that they, to know that they would do that, especially in a place like Texas, who just, outside of China, has one of the worst opinions and treatment of people who are in jail. Not even subhuman. They look at you as even less than subhuman. So I don't know. But what I'm going to do, and I don't know if I'm going to get anywhere with this, is I'm going to call this Dr. Barry Norman, because it's the first name that I've gotten where when someone has had a psychological exam. And I want to know. There's certain things that I want to know. I think we're, as a journalist, and just as someone who's worked with Bao, I think we're entitled to know what did this judge tell the doctor. He's a PhD in psychology. What information did he get? Did the judge? I have a real problem thinking that this Judge Hardy, this lawyer, actually told him, hey, this guy came in and was challenging jurisdiction, so I'm ordering him to do a psychological evaluation with you. I would imagine that if the guy had any ethics whatsoever, he would say, whoa, all the guy did was ask a question? It's not grounds for a psychological exam. So I'm wondering, so he's probably, he's probably not going to tell me the details, but it's worth calling to find out. What the hell did you tell him, Shirley, or Cheryl? Probably turned around and said he may be one of these sovereign types. But even that is not grounds to challenge someone's mental competency. As I've mentioned before, mental competency, you want to challenge that? Do that for Cheryl. For exhibiting psychopathic or sociopathic behavior. A psychological evaluation. I still can't get past this. A psychological evaluation for asking if jurisdiction is an element of the charge. Disgusting. Anyway, cheer up, Mark. I am happy. It irks the hell out of me, and it should bother anybody with a conscience that these judges like Cheryl Hardy get to do what they're doing, and the average person probably doesn't even know. So we're doing what we can to make sure. I'm going to have the video. I know I've been talking about this, but there's a lot of work going into these videos. I want people to have as much information as is relevant so that we can understand and know a bit more, know about these people. They should not be operating in obscurity. The Tarrant County Commissioners should absolutely know and get tired of hearing the name Cheryl Hardy. This is such a disgusting abuse of authority. It's absolutely sickening. Just the idea of a psychological, just questioning someone's sanity. So what we're going to do, and if someone does know a psychologist, and they don't have to be an anarchist. In fact, I actually prefer not to go through that again, because I hate when people say, "You go contact this guy, he's great," and then you leave messages and they never call you back. So fungal with these anarchist psychologist. I don't need that. I just need some psychologist or psychiatrist that is willing to make an official statement that asking questions about jurisdiction and challenging lawyers' legal conclusions is no legal grounds whatsoever for a psychological exam. Well, we only need the one, but it would help to get even more. Get a whole bunch of psychologists or psychiatrists to sign off on this, that this is not a reason to challenge somebody's mental competency. But wanting to do a psychological exam on somebody who is just asking questions, your psychological evaluation should be scheduled next. Your sanity, well, not so much the sanity, but the fact that you are exhibiting psychopathic behavior. You're exhibiting antisocial behavior, and you should not be around other people. And you should certainly not be in a position to hurt other people. You should not be given a platform that allows you to hurt people with impunity. That these judges like Hardy have absolute immunity. But their insurance doesn't. So I'll go to the phones in just a second, because somebody had mentioned I keep talking about insurance, but I'm not explaining what that means. That was in fact, that was one of the comments on the last video. I actually put in the graphics the website for Tarrant County Risk Management. It's right there in the video. When I'm talking about insurance, is that all the counties and cities and states, they self-insure. This has nothing to do with the feds, because they don't have bonds or anything like that anymore. What they do is they self-insure. And then then they're reinsured by a regular private insurance company. And those policies cover damages that are caused by city, county, or state employees. We know from legal citations that they do cover prosecutors and judges. Judges are covered. Now, while the judge may have absolute civil immunity, that the brotherhood of the robe will never let you and I pierce that. They will stick together. If you think the blue wall of silence is bad, whoa, the black wall of silence is far worse. Far worse and far more powerful. But we can get around the sovereign immunity by filing a claim for damages against their insurance. And then if that's turned down, we hate to do it, but you file into court. And like we were talking last week, if you're filing a big enough claim, and I don't think 25 million, you have to have some kind of, you have to be able to justify it. But if you do file a notice of claim with the county, so that if there's a chance that it could hurt their credit rating, then we need to do it. So that's what I mean by the insurance. I'm just talking about the reinsurance that helps cover or underwrites the self-insurance policies that the municipality or the county or the state may have. Yes, hit them where they breathe. They should be sick to death of hearing the name Cheryl Hardy. But you know what? I don't want to hear her name anymore. I wish that I never had to hear her name, but she's a friggin' monster. And she needs to be held accountable. And the only way to do that is to raise hell with their insurance. Go to the county commissioners. Go to their meetings, their public meetings, and say this woman is a monster. Oh, it's not for us to get involved with the judicial. You've got someone on the payroll who's covered by your insurance, who is being reckless and hurting people. And so now, if anyone else is hurt by this piece of garbage, Hardy, if they do a Google search, they're going to find my website. They're going to find the information, and they're going to find that this is not an isolated incident, unfortunately. They're going to find there's other people she has damaged. So maybe we get multiple claims against the insurance for this woman. Maybe when they get enough, well, good. I live in Arizona, Phoenix. Tens and tens of millions of dollars weren't enough to keep Joe Arpaio out. But then again, he's elected. Thank goodness that monster is gone now. Anyway, let me get to the calls. And if you want to join me here, it is 218-632-9399. The passcode is 2020. We're going to go to area code 615. You're live on the No State Project. What's your name? Where you calling from?
Yes, my name is Randall Stroud from Nashville, Tennessee.
Yeah, and nobody has to give their last name out. That's not necessary. But welcome to the big show. What can I do for you today?
Well, I've been a fan of yours for a long time. I've been fighting the legal system for quite a long time. But here recently, I got put on the child support system by a vindictive ex, and they're confiscating 50% of my income. And if I get behind even $1, they're constantly threatening to take away my driver's license and passports. I'm constantly at the barrel of a gun. Well, aren't we all? But now I have 2 guns on me. And I fought a lot of traffic tickets in my day, and I fought a lot of IRS liens, and have had some success. But this is a different animal. And I recently uncovered Title IV, Section D of the Social Security Act says that for every dollar they collect in child support, the states actually get matched that same amount from the federal government, and they get grant money. So they're actually being rewarded for this confiscation that's happening.
Well, just hold on one second. We're talking with, and these are difficult. I'll tell you right off the bat, these are always very difficult. So welcome back, Randy. So you're saying that under the Social Security Act that every dollar is matched by the federal government for money that's taken in on child support, or...
That is correct, and I've even started a human rights organization, and I am an anarcho-capitalist myself, and I've worked on a lot of issues. The name of my organization is called Nalini Global, but I've went all around the country speaking about this, and I even have a video. I'm getting ready to post it on my YouTube channel today. At a conference, they told me right to my face that we don't care if you see your kids, we want your money. And
who told you that?
Pretty brutal.
Who told you? Who told you that? Who told you that? Who made that statement to you about not giving a damn, not caring about whether you seen your kids? They want their money.
This was at a town hall conference, so it was publicly. I mean, the whole audience could hear it. It was a conference where people could come up and actually speak to the Child Support Enforcement Agency directly and ask them questions, and they admitted. They said, we're a Title 4D federally funded agency, and, they said it in very legalese, very professional language, but anyone who truly understands what they're saying and has a little bit of legal education could clearly understand exactly what they're saying. And it's pretty crazy. Anyone who's been in the family law system, you're automatically, especially if you're of the male gender, most likely you're going to get at least half of your property taken. And then, of course, the lawyers and the judges and everyone involved, the mother, the Child Support Enforcement Agency, they're all profiting and getting a piece of this pie. And like I said, I've seen men get arrested for even being $1 behind in child support because, hey, there's the prison industrial complex right there. We can't get your money on the front end, so we'll lock you up on the back end. But my question for you is, in all of your experiences, have you ever helped anyone in any child support cases or alimony or anything along those lines?
I have, but like I mentioned at the beginning, those are extremely difficult. And
yeah,
if you think they basically operate in a similar manner as someone like Cheryl Hardy, these traffic courts, where they just do whatever they want. There was came out about 6-7 years ago where I don't even remember. It was on the East Coast where the state attorney general is saying that CPS, or Child Protective Services, isn't even governed by the Constitution. They just came right out and stated that the public relations didn't apply. These are always extremely difficult, and we've had only very limited success in these. And here you already have a judgment. I mean, so did this involve a divorce?
Well, I had actually divorced this woman years ago, and she disappeared, and everything was great. Didn't hear from her for about 3 years, and she went to go live with her wealthy family. And she got on their bad side, and they kicked her out. And she came looking for me and said, "Hey, here's your 3-year-old son that I never told you about." And long story short, I didn't want to get back together with her, so she got angry and went to the court system to point a gun at me and confiscate my stuff.
Well, did she, after the divorce, so did she go to court and get an order from the court for support?
3 years later, yes. And here's the funny part is they actually go back to the time of the birth. So I've been to court so many times over this. There's even case law on my case, Stroud versus Sason. I brought this even to federal court to bring up constitutional issues. And but yeah, they can actually go back. So if a woman from your past, before you met your wife, said, "Hey, Mark, I forgot to tell you, I got pregnant that one night. This is your kid." The DNA test comes back and it is yours. She can go back in many states to the time of the child's birth and get you for 10 or 15 years of child support on a child that you never had any knowledge of, and they expect you to pay it up front. And if you can't, they suspend your passport, they put it on your credit report, and they've done all of that to me. I have fewer rights than a prisoner in many cases, all because I didn't know about my child for 3 years.
Well, yeah, this is a common question is that when some people who are pro-abortion say it's the woman's choice, period, that the man has no input whatsoever, zero. But he's 100% on the hook if she carries and has the child. Whether they care for the child or not is irrelevant. The man is always on the hook. The problem comes in here, although it wouldn't stop me, is that if you were the one who divorced her, it's very difficult for you to then challenge jurisdiction because you're the plaintiff.
Well, I verbally, said that I wanted to divorce her, but she was in agreement with it, and she paid for the attorney. I didn't even show up to court, because there was no property to fight over, so everything got handled without me even being there. And at that time, there was no awareness of any child being involved, and we had all of our own property in our own names. So technically, legally, on paper, she filed it in, even though I was the one that asked for it.
Well, if there's no, if there's going to be some kind of consent decree, then nobody has to show up to court except for the attorney, maybe. But how did you fight? I mean, what were your grounds? Did you fight her petition to get support?
Oh, well, we've been in court over this for the last 2 years. They've threatened me with an imprisonment many times, and I even wrote a book on this and submitted it to the United Nations. I mean, this is a really big epidemic that's going around in the entire world. The Swedish Liberal Party in Sweden, they're the only country in the world that has proposed the idea of a male financial abortion, whereas a woman has up to 9 weeks to decide if she wants to get an abortion or not. In Sweden, they proposed that men have up to 9 weeks to say, "Hey, I thought you said you were on the pill," or "Hey, I don't want to be a father," and they can sign their rights away and be legally absolved. They have up to 9 weeks to do that. And of course, it's been shot down in the media as being, misogynist and against women and all these kind of things. But after a child is born, in many states, like in South Dakota, you have up to, well, a woman does, she has up to a year after the child is born under what's called the safe haven law. she can drop off her child at any police or fire station and be legally absolved. But men, to walk away from their children or to say, hey, I want to opt out of parentage, it's a felony in many cases, especially if your child support goes over $2,000 and you live in a different state than your child. It becomes a felony. I mean, so it's a very bastardly system.
Well, sure.
And before I got on child support, I was fighting the traffic courts. I mean, so I really do sympathize with you quite a bit, battling the traffic courts.
Well, let's look at what the issues that were raised and that you're battling in court. Well, actually, that's what we'll have to come back to. So we'll write that down, the issues that you raised, and we'll discuss that and see if we can come up with some kind of remedy, which, it's very difficult. So, Randy, what issues have you raised in your opposition to this order for support?
First and foremost, I challenged the courts. I mean, because I was definitely not able to have a fair trial since I was being tried by the state of Tennessee child support agency, the judge. I try to move everything and remove it to a federal jurisdiction, and then there I brought up the fact that
Okay. Well, hold on. Why would you move it to federal jurisdiction?
Well, I mean, you have a state judge, and the prosecution actually pays for the mother to have a state attorney. They don't give the fathers any sort of services rendered. So everything there was the state of Tennessee, and even the Child Support Enforcement Agency of Tennessee was also present. And I tried to remove that into federal court to get rid of those state agents and move it into a more, what I see as a more fair playing field.
Okay.
But,
but Randy, do you know what the basis for removal is, and if so, does that include a And I'm not discounting that there's a conflict of interest. I agree with you there, but is a conflict of interest one of the grounds for doing a removal to federal jurisdiction?
No, but
what is
one of the grounds? The ground that I brought up was constitutional questions and a federal question, because there's certainly constitutional questions, especially 14th Amendment, equal protection under the law. Whenever you walk in, there's a presumption that the male is going to be the non-custodial parent and the female is going to be the custodial parent and the one receiving child support. That's why child support is discussed before any sort of custody is even mentioned. So there's already a presumption of discrimination right from the get-go, so that was one thing that I brought up. And also the Fourth Amendment, married men are, they don't have agents knocking on their door saying, hey, how much money did you give your kid this month? There's plenty of unemployed married men that just sit on the couch and don't do anything. Maybe their wife is the breadwinner, and but no one bothers them because they're legally married.
Let's stick to the legal issues first, and let's flesh that out. A federal question. What is? There's a very limited scope that you have to be able to remove it from a state court to a federal court. Now, having a federal question or a constitutional question, I don't think that qualifies in and of itself, because you can raise due process violations all the time in state court. That's not grounds to move a murder trial into the federal court. So I'm asking, do you know what those limited grounds are? What is necessary? What has to be there in order to move a case successfully from the state court to the federal court? What is the requirement that has to exist?
I mean, well, as far as I knew, there has to be a constitutional question or a federal question that the states they themselves cannot answer. But it was already remanded back to the state courts anyways, because they threw a bunch of Supreme Court cases at me saying that the federal government does not have any jurisdiction over family law matters unless there's an international conflict of child support going on, where one of the parents lives in a certain country where there is an international agreement on child support between the United States and whatever country the other parent is living in. So I'm back in state court now, right, so it's kind of a moot point.
Well, because what I'm getting to, and I want other people to know this, because it seems it's a very common tactic in, and I'm not saying this applies to you, but Sovereign and Freeman type, that for whatever reason they think that they can remove it to federal court and they'll actually get a better shake there. My experience, the federal courts are brutal. And when you've got pieces of filth like Stephen Myrie, who was the acting attorney general in Nevada, who in the Bundy case, and I've got this video, should be up today, he is a serial offender. This guy is going back at least 10 years of not only withholding exculpatory evidence from defendants, but he lies to the judges. The judges know he's lying. They catch him on it. And then they say, oh, but it was flagrant. It was unconscionable, but we don't think they did it deliberately. Oh, Baba Fong. So when you've got judges who work so openly with criminals like Stephen Myrie, the federal court is the last place you want to be. If you can't get it through in the state court, federal court's not going to help. But my point here is, there's only one situation that you can use to remove a case from the state court to the federal court. And that is the phrase concurrent jurisdiction. There has to be concurrent jurisdiction with the state court and the federal court on the subject matter. So an example of that would be RICO. If somebody was to start a RICO action against you in the state court, then you would have grounds to move it to the federal court if you had reason to do that. Otherwise, you don't, and that's why it got sent back. Now, real quick, bear with me for a second. The thing that gets me about because it has to be concurrent jurisdiction, is if you file against the IRS in state court, they will automatically file a removal to the federal court and have it dismissed for a lack of jurisdiction. And that always made me crazy. Like, how could they possibly get away with that? Because the federal courts are so damn corrupt. They are so friggin' dishonest. So that even when it says the only time you can remove it successfully is when there's concurrent jurisdiction. And then to turn around and say there isn't jurisdiction. Well, if there wasn't jurisdiction, then there wasn't concurrent jurisdiction with the federal court to throw it out. So if anything, only the state court would have had the authority to, but they do it anyway. Why? Because they're going to roll over and bend over backwards to help the IRS and other federal agencies. So when we are filing these things, we have to make absolutely certain, knowing how corrupt these people are and how friggin' dishonest they are, we have to make sure that when we file into their courts, we're doing it appropriately. And here, I hate to do this. I don't want anyone calling and that I have to agree with the U.S. Attorney's Office or a state attorney's. But here they got you on the issue of the removal was improper.
Well, I'm going to play a little bit of devil's advocate, and you are making a very great point. I mean, if you try to remove something to the federal government, I mean, come on, the states and the federal government, they're already in bed with each other anyways, so how much more luck are you actually going to have? But in my case, it is being governed by Title IV, Section D of the Social Security Act, which is a federal law, and I can't even bring that up in state court and the unfairness surrounding it. So that's one reason. But I think another reason why a lot of people want to use that tactic to move things in the federal court is just because the rules and the laws are more uniform. So if you had a child support order in Texas, but you lived in Arizona, you may have to deal with multiple laws in different states. So as far as memorizing rules and civil procedures and things like that, it's a bit more uniform. But you also make an awesome point too, is if you're dealing with a federal agency or a federal law, they're probably going to try to protect themselves just like the states would. So it's not really a whole lot better.
So I want to know the question that I have. It's two parts here. What what is your issue of raising Title IV, and why wouldn't the court allow you to raise an issue based on Title IV?
Well, because Title IV, Section D, the Social Security Act is a federal law, and the state judges try to argue, well, we didn't pass that law, the federal Congress did, so you have to take it up with the federal government. We have nothing to do with it, even though they're contracted and they benefit from such a law. So that was one of the basis of me wanting to move things into federal court. And just from an activist position, if I did have some kind of limited success, then maybe it would turn into some case law that would benefit someone else, which others have done.
Well, what was your issue exactly? But what was your argument? That was, just tell me, what it was.
Okay.
So when I say that there's a due process violation because we didn't get discovery, that's being specific. I asked for discovery and from exculpatory evidence. They didn't give it to me. So give me the exact argument you were using that was from Title IV.
Well, it's very similar to the argument that you often made from early in your days about there being a conflict of interest. The state is being, the judge is being paid by the state. Everyone's being paid by the state so that there's not a fair playing field. Same thing with Title IV, Section D. I made the argument that I brought up human trafficking, the fact that these agencies are on record admitting that the higher that they set child support amounts for, the more money that the federal government under Title IV is going to send to these agencies. So that's definitely a charge of corruption right then and there, is that there's already a presumption that when someone walks into a child support office, hey, we're going to give this guy, we're going to make his order as high as we possibly can because we're getting a cut from this. So I want to go straight to the source since it's under a federal law, federal jurisdiction. And challenge that federal law in federal court.
Oh, okay. But you're challenging the federal law. I don't think the federal law has anything to do with the issue. I think it's two separate issues. You have the conflict of interest because of all the state actors on the same team, and then you have Title IV, which is where they're giving money and matching funds when they collect Social Security. So when you raise the issue of a conflict of interest, they just denied it. And so you raise the issue, you have your evidence, and they just flat out denied it.
Yeah, the judge actually told me, he got smart with me, and he says, well, I don't care who's paying me. I don't care if McDonald's is writing my check. I'm going to do my job the same, and just kind of skirted over the issue.
Okay, and so he told you specifically that not it wasn't the plaintiff's attorney, but the judge told you point blank that you were not to raise Title IV issues.
Yes, sir.
Wow. So even though they're operating under Title IV, you weren't allowed to raise the issue.
Well, and the funny thing is, people are just now starting to find out that there is a profit scheme that's happening in the Child Support Enforcement Agency. And again, this is not a rant to say that, you shouldn't financially, support your children or be involved in their life. I mean, I'm a part of a fatherhood initiative. I believe in 50-50 shared parenting. There should be no intrusive government pointing a gun at your head saying, hey, Mark, or whoever, you only pay $300 this month for your kid when you're ordered to pay $400. Sorry, we got to put you in prison. That's the problem that I have, and that's what we're fighting against here. It's not, hey, I want to get out of taking care of my kid, but
sure.
The obvious corruption is right there in front of your eyes.
But as far as
a lot of people don't know about Title IV and how much money these agencies are actually making. So when you start mentioning Title IV Section D in a public sphere, I've been kicked out of a lot of places just even mentioning that law and talking about it, because people start scratching their heads, they get on their phone, they start Googling, and they really get irritated about it. They really do when you mention it.
Well, I'm sure. I definitely have my share of stories like that. And I know, like, Cheryl Hardy, the crook in Tarrant County, Texas, doesn't like being asked questions about jurisdiction. But as far as, because I want to get to what we could do for a possible resolution,
Right.
what arguments, if any, did you make, and what facts did you have that to attack the just the fact that she wanted support and was entitled to support? How did you attack that?
Well, I attacked that from a 14th Amendment issue and a Fourth Amendment issue. And there is case law. Other people have attacked child support on the same basis. There was a case in Michigan, Matt Dubay versus Lauren Wells. He attacked her on the same premise using the 14th Amendment and the Fourth Amendment. The 14th Amendment, there should be equal protection under the law. Men and women should be treated the same, and obviously they're not in family law courts. And then the Fourth Amendment itself, you have a right to privacy. The government doesn't go into married couples' homes and dictate how much they're giving to their children. So just because I'm unmarried, the government tells me that if you don't pay this arbitrary amount of money and give it to this woman, then you don't love your kids, you don't want to support your kids, and we're going to put you in jail and lock you up. That's pure discrimination, and that's anti-privacy right then and there.
I'm going to have to. I think that's kind of really strained because to put it that particular way, because they do get involved with married people. They force married people to put their children into their schools. Some places, you have no choice to even homeschool or you have to.
I agree with you on that, and I'm not disputing that. I'm just speaking purely from a financial standpoint. The government does not go into married people's home and say, "Hey, how much money did you give to your kid this month?" Or how much money did you give to your wife this month?
But Randy,
you didn't meet the arbitrary number that we came up with that you should give her, so we're going to put you in prison.
But
they
Randy,
don't do that to married people, but they do. They do other things. I agree with.
But I'm getting to the point I'm getting to here is what did you use to show she was not entitled to any support?
I guess I really challenged the laws itself, but you make a really good point. That's the whole original sin, if you will, is why is she not entitled to child support? But to be honest, I've kind of gotten past that at this point. I'm trying to make an argument.
Randy, I got to jump in here because we're almost at the end of the break, and we can only go one more segment here. That's a big part of it because you're in a civil context, and there has to be injury and damage. She has to show the violation of a legal right that's causing her harm. So if she's alleging a valid cause of action, that's the basis of standing and, of course, subject matter jurisdiction to have a valid case. So if you're not attacking her assertion that she has a legal right to X, Y, Z, you're missing a huge part of your defense, and it's going to make it just that much harder to try to clean it up. It's one thing if you brought it up, and let me mute you up or up against the break if the judge ignored that. But here it sounds like it's not an issue you raised, but jurisdiction and standing you can raise it on appeal for the first time. So I want to reiterate again before I bring Randy back on. I have said this thousands of times. I say it. I'm sure I say it on every single consult I do when it's appropriate. The closer you get to a trial with these predators, these criminals, because they force everyone to pay them. There's your evidence. The closer you get to a trial, the lower your chances are of getting it tossed out. Because the fact is, if you get to the trial after the arraignment and after the pretrial and the motions, including a motion to dismiss for prosecutorial misconduct, it is obvious that the predator with the robe on has absolutely no intention of even trying to make it look fair. And that's why I say to people thousands of times now, I am not failing to disclose this to everybody. This is basic common sense of any basic observation. The closer you get to the trial, the more difficult it's going to be to get it thrown out. If you already have a judgment, it is almost impossible because there are rape people who are falsely imprisoned for rape. And the DNA completely exonerates them. And they still don't want to let you go. They don't want to admit that their judgment is wrong. So I'm not failing to disclose this to anybody. I am, okay? So I do recommend the role playing. It has helped a lot of people. And will continue to do so. Because that's where when we confront them at the arraignment or at a pretrial, that is what I believe is getting the leverage to convince the prosecutors to withdraw. And you can see the withdrawals on markstevens.net. So I want to bring Randy back because I want to actually start addressing some of these issues. How would you go about being able to show that she is not entitled to any support?
Well, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. She is the mother, and she does not have any, financial orders placed upon her head. I am a father. Why should I have any financial orders placed upon my head under duress? Where's the injury? Where's the harm? Where's the original contract that, I agreed to all of this? There's no breach of contract. There's no injury. There's no harm. So where's the basis for this reward this monetary reward that she's seeking?
She's making a claim, I'm sure, that since you are the biological father, because you're the biological father, you are responsible for at least part of the responsibility, the upkeep, the expenses to raise the child. So that's a pretty strong position for her to come at this. So I'm asking you, what evidence would you have to negate that? Or what argument do you have and evidence to negate or mitigate her claim?
Well, there was a case up in Rochester, New York. The word itself, support, can be legally defined in many different ways. So when you're asking for child support, if I hold my son, if I teach him a lesson, if I teach him how to fish or work on a car, or if I show him love, is there any legal evidence that itself is not support? And whenever he's in my care, he is being fed, he's being taken care of. So I'm meeting the obligation of support. And where does your legal obligation or where does your legal authority come from to say that I have to pay X amount of money to give to the mother in order for this kid to be emotionally and financially supported when it's already being demonstrated that he's healthy and living a good life and he's not struggling at all? Please demonstrate where he's not being supported.
Well, the question is, let me ask you this. Do you believe you're responsible for at least 50% of the expenses to raise the child?
Are we talking philosophically here or legally?
As a parent, we're talking about morally.
It's a really tough question because
that's a tough question.
I didn't even know about my son for 3 years, okay. And I feel like that he was created upon false pretenses. I was with this woman for 4 years. We both agreed that we never wanted to have children. She was on birth control. Once I started talking about divorce, she stopped taking the birth control pills. So there is an element of fraud here, but the fact that he is here now and he is a part of my DNA, then, of course I'll do all that I can to support him. Okay. But I believe that she bears 50% of the error, as do I.
Well, are they making you now? So the element of fraud is something that should have been considered at trial. So there's definitely an issue there. If you were married and you had an agreement, whether it doesn't matter, it wasn't in writing, and that you were understood that she was on birth control to prevent a certain outcome, that is definitely something that should affect and the order. Now,
and that right there is where my anger comes from. If it was consensual and everything like that, I mean, 60% of my anger would be out of the window, and then she waits 3 years to even tell me he exists. I mean, so
okay, but
there's definitely a lot of salty eggs on my end of the aisle.
Okay, but now, are you telling me that she has got an order where you are on the hook for 100% of the expenses to raise the child?
No, but whenever the order was put in, I was making like $22,000 a year. Was not a good year for me, and they set my support at $700 a month. And they also confiscate my tax refund every year also. And even if you don't show up to court, even if you don't agree to get DNA tests, even if you don't give them any jurisdiction whatsoever, I've seen this happen a million times in family law court. If you don't show up, they will make you a daddy by default. If someone names you as a father and you don't go for DNA testing, they'll just say, well, I guess Marc Stevens is going to be on the hook for child support. He's the father.
You don't even have to be the biological father to be on the hook. They do that,
that
all
is
the
correct.
time.
And I've seen it happen a million times.
Yeah, we're out of time, so we'll have to finish this discussion off air. Maybe I can help you off air, but definitely look at the fraud issue, and you can file for a modification and run the numbers again. So just hold tight. Also, the one after that will be the criminal Cheryl Hardy. And so she has a lot more information available about her publicly as opposed to Stephen Myrie, who has very, very little information about him online. Although he did go, I'll give you this, he went to the Marquis University there in Milwaukee. I do know that about him. And I have a picture from that yearbook, which is really cool. So we have an idea of what he looked at before he became such a corrupt piece of garbage. Probably why he had hair at the time. Probably why he, stress and living your life as a lying piece of garbage is probably what made him lose his hair. Which to me is punish. It's not all the punishment this piece of garbage deserves, but yeah, that's when you lie like that, 600. How do you not give 650 documents to someone and then lie to the judge? Let me tell you something. All Bao did was ask if jurisdiction was an element of the charge. He got jail, no bond, and a psych eval. Stephen Myrie lied to the judge. The judge knew he lied. He got caught lying. Nothing. So I just want to address something before I get back to the callers. I spend my entire day participating in helping people resolve court problems, and I do that on Skype and I do it on email. And yes, I put people into the chat, and I have always said I appreciate what the guys do to help in the chat. Okay? And to turn around and say just because I'm not doing those calls, when I could do a broadcast for 3 hours, when am I and then I have to get into and do a role play? I have to edit the damn broadcast. I have a family. How many hours a day do you think that I can do this? It is beyond the pale to sit there and make these claims against me, Popeye, that I'm not doing enough. The whole time I am on the computer, which is all day, even when I'm on hold with the IRS, hundreds of people could testify to this. I am responding to emails and I'm responding to Skype questions. So even if I'm not participating on a direct call, that doesn't mean I'm not helping people with role play and asking questions. Okay? Good Lord. Crying, the one who's crying is you with your damn complaints on the Skype that I'm not doing enough. Yeah, it has been a while. I guess it was the last time Gary was involved, so it's been a few months. But it's not a matter of crying. It's just a matter of, good Lord, be reasonable here. Gee, it's like this chat and the calls are not the only way that I help people. Good Lord. No good deed goes unpunished. Just like I got to hear the endless, Mark doesn't moderate enough. Mark doesn't do... Oh, please. All right, let's get back to the calls. There's always something about that damn chat. Always someone bitching and moaning and crying. For heaven's sakes, I'm not doing enough. I look at the success page. In fact, I've got 3 more success stories that I need to get posted. So I'm hoping that we got a couple of the callers are actually for the success stories. So we've got Maxwell in Washington. Welcome back to the big show.
How's it going, Mark?
Yeah, it's going well. It's just, the thing is, you do your best as a one-man show, basically, to as far as the groundwork and helping. And there's always someone who has to complain. I got Shelby, who is constantly bitching that and misconstruing what I'm doing. And I got somebody else saying that I don't help people enough in the chat because I never get on a call, or it's been months since I've been on a call. And the thing is, you're always going to have someone who's going to bitch and complain, and so what do you know?
Yeah, I can't please everyone.
I shouldn't have even have mentioned it, but I just maybe because there's a lot of new people getting into the chat, and everyone who gets into the chat, if you have an issue and you're having problems, everyone already knows that just because I put you into the No State Project Skype chat doesn't mean you can't contact me anymore. And for those who want to do a role play with me, I do a 3-hour broadcast here on the Liberty Radio Network every single Saturday. We do role-playing all the time. I don't do things on this show like a lot of shows. I don't try to get 3 or 4 callers in on every segment, and I don't do just one segment per caller. I just had Randy on for an hour, and okay, so I have people that if we do the role playing on the show also. So there's only so far you can stretch yourself, and to not understand that and to look at a bigger context and want to bitch about it, about fungal is all I can say to something like that. So what do you got? Good news for us today?
Actually, and no. I called in last Saturday, actually, from Pomeroy, Washington, Maxwell.
Right.
I went through my arraignment, and he forced me into pretrial. I brought in the unsigned plea of guilt, and he did pretty much exactly what you say he's going to do, and eventually just kind of ignored me and pushed me into pretrial and signed a not guilty plea for me.
Well, okay, so you did hand him a copy of the unsigned plea of guilty?
No, he didn't even let me hand it to him. He didn't want anything to do with it. So,
but you did make it clear that your intention was to plead guilty. You just wanted to know if okay. And
I made it sure I wanted to plead guilty. All I wanted was proof of jurisdiction, and if you could point to me where that's at. The time before that, my second arraignment, I guess, because first one, like I said before, I called it, or I asked him if I could extend my arraignment because I had just got discovery, and I wanted to thumb through the things myself, and that's when I kind of started getting into the subject of jurisdiction, and I did what you said, what you advised to do, and he pretty much reacted the way that you said he would, as far as pushing me through to pretrial and not really wanting to touch my issue of jurisdiction because I don't have it.
Okay, well, let me get back to this. I want to know because what we should be saying to the judge, and remember, we're asking a leading question, is I intend on pleading guilty. Has the prosecution met their prima facie burden? Is there any evidence proving the Constitution and Code apply just because I'm physically in Washington? So did you ask him? Yeah, and what was his response?
I asked him for the empirical proof of jurisdiction, and he looked at me and what do you mean empirical proof? And I said, well, I want the physical proof that your laws and codes apply to me just because I'm physically here in Washington.
But did you put it did you put it and phrase it the correct way, and has the prosecution presented such evidence? And you don't need to say empirical.
I did at one time say that. I can't remember exactly when, but has the prosecution submitted any evidence of jurisdiction of proof of these laws and codes that apply to me?
Okay, so how did he respond when you asked him if the prosecution had submitted such evidence?
He'd asked the prosecution if they had such evidence, and he said he didn't have it right now. And he'd get to me back, he'd have it in like a day, And he's, all right, well, there you go, and we're going to send this to the first. We're going to be in court on the first, and you, this, that, and the other. No, I want to plead guilty if they have it now.
Okay, well, hold on just a second. So, Maxwell, so the judge just ignored and wouldn't respond at all to whether the prosecution had the evidence. So, knowing that you were trying to plead guilty, you just wanted to know if the prosecutor had met their burden of proof so that you could enter a voluntary and intelligent plea. And instead of allowing you to do that, instead of being responsive to the question, he just pled not guilty for you.
Yeah. Just before that, he had said that my guilty plea was conditional. And I had said, well, all I'm asking for is the proof of jurisdiction that you're supposed to have before I'm even called here.
Well, let me address this because it's a very common lie. It's not conditional. The judge has an obligation to make sure that the prosecution has met their prima facie burden, to show that he does have jurisdiction to even hold you for the arraignment.
Yeah.
Asking if the prosecution has met their burden of proof is not a conditional plea. A conditional plea, to make it as simple as possible, is I will enter a plea of not guilty if there's no jail time.
Yeah.
But has the prosecution met their prima facie burden? No. So he lied to you. So you want to object and say, objection, you're trying to mislead me here. And you explain to him. Doesn't the prosecution have to meet their burden on jurisdiction before you can set this for arraignment and trial? Again, that's, so, and he may not answer that question. But you've definitely got him on the record now of lying. So I would move to change the judge and strike the plea, and I would put in the motion to change.
That's what I'm in the middle of right now.
Good.
I'm in the middle of filing a motion to strike the plea, motion to dismiss the judge. But I believe the judge that I have is going to be the one signing off on those, so it'll be interesting to see if that even happens.
Well, it's supposed to be a mandatory thing. In fact, in some places you don't even need grounds, like California, Arizona. Most places you can get the judge disqualified or recused for no reason at all. But here you've got good grounds because he lied saying it was a conditional plea, and it's not. So he lied about that, and to enter a plea of not guilty for you, he has to have evidence showing that you're refusing to plea, which you weren't doing. Yeah. Even if you were doing a conditional plea, you're not refusing to plea. So he's lying on two accounts, and both of them are to cover for the prosecution's lack of evidence. Why can't they just say yes or no?
Yeah.
No, they have to go through this web of lies about a conditional plea or that you're refusing to plea, instead of just saying yes or no.
Or threaten me with being, imprisoned or caged.
Yeah, he has to exert some mental stress on you,
Yeah.
So do you have a pretrial conference set?
Yeah, it's for the first. Yeah, he set me up. I just had my arraignment was just this last Thursday, 2 days ago, and he set it up for the first. So I got my pretrial is the first, so it'll be this coming Thursday. And
have you done some role playing to prepare for that?
At the moment, not yet. I'm going to be though. I got some. My stepdad and a few other people that are pretty savvy with all this jurisdiction stuff have been looking into it a bit longer than I have. But I'll be able to role play with a little bit at least.
Well, we got the No State Project Skype chat, and I'll have to say this: I don't get there too often, but the guys do a great job. They give of themselves. They've helped a lot of people, and new people continue to be added. And then after, let's say, like yourself goes through it, then you're able to participate and help other people that come in there. And yeah, I do my best to try to get in there, but. Even if I was there once or twice a month, there would still be someone. Why can't you be here every time? Why can't you do this? Why can't you do it? Oh, So definitely work on your leading questions and holding the prosecution to their burden, as we've got outlined in the discovery request. Because the two main points that we're looking for here is evidence proving their claim that just because you're physically in Washington that the Constitution and Code apply. The other thing is we need to know if the witness they're calling has personal knowledge of evidence proving that the Constitution and Code apply. Because again, I have to keep repeating this, you have to have personal knowledge of the matters you're testifying to. If the police officer is making legal determinations that the laws apply and you violated them, which is why they're calling the cop, then he has to have personal knowledge of that. So that's what the two main things we're focusing on when we're talking with the prosecutor. And that is your opportunity to do some serious damage control, because you'll be able to get his own statements that he doesn't have the evidence, or he'll lie and say that the evidence is in the ticket.
Yeah.
And so you'll be able to use that against them.
So going into pretrials, I'm just going to bring up all the evidence that I have against them. I'm not really sure how to go about fighting this in pretrials. I keep pushing the issue. I'm going to keep pushing the issue of jurisdiction and prima facie. But other than that,
but that's what
should I
that's
prepare
what I'm saying.
myself with evidence and other things of the sort?
All you need to the only thing you need to show is bring maybe the ticket, because that's all they have against you. And so you can ask the prosecutor, where on this ticket or what on this ticket is evidence proving that just because I'm physically in Washington, your laws apply to me? What do you know, it's all written down. And so when it's that specific and it's something here that could be cited very easily, then he might turn around and say, I don't have to do that. And I would say, oh, excuse me, let me see if I understand you correctly. You can make a legal claim against me and you don't need any evidence. Really? And exactly what kind of relationship do you have with the judge you're allowed to get away with that?
Yeah.
And then you ask him, okay, so since you get to argue without evidence, you can make claims against me without evidence. Do I get to make claims against you without evidence?
Okay.
Okay, and then when he says absolutely not, I would definitely urge sanctions against you. Well, then why don't you? I said, do you think that's fair that you can make claims against me without evidence, but it's sanctionable against me if I do that? Do you think that's fair? And then say, why does again push the? I like to do this. Say, what kind of relationship do you have with this judge where you can get away with that, but I can't?
Yeah. Okay.
See, and this is how the pretrial should be. You should be pounding away at his burden of proof and the presumption of fairness, or the facade of fairness, that what they're doing to you is fair. And because it's very simple, everybody. He or she either has the evidence proving their claim and have a witness with personal knowledge of that, or they don't. And if they don't, the right thing is to dismiss it. And for those who are new, also remember the exculpatory evidence or information that can be used to impeach the police officer. If the police officer does not have personal first-hand knowledge of the matters he's testifying to, the prosecutor has to explicitly state that. They have to say that their witness is not qualified. They have to say, by the way, this witness has no personal knowledge, and we're going to call him as a witness anyway. It should be sanctionable, but we know, as Kaczynski has, the former federal judge Kaczynski has told us, that prosecutorial misconduct are at epidemic levels, and only judges can stop it and hold them prosecutors accountable, and they're not going to do it. So, unfortunately, we are at a break, so you can get more information off air, okay? Also, I just want to make a quick comment. Larkin Rose made his case, as he testified here on this show and in his book, Kicking the Dragon. The judge actually stated that he believed that Larkin was sincere in his beliefs that he was not required to pay taxes. He made his case. The prosecution failed to prove otherwise, and a brain-dead group of people still convicted him. They heard the judge say that. Now, the judge shouldn't have given it to the jury to begin with, because he could have made a determination that they had clearly not established their case beyond a reasonable doubt. But that's what happened there. So I want to get back to the callers. We have Adam. Adam, welcome to the show.
Hey, Mark, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Where are you calling from today?
I'm calling from Alberta, Canada.
Alberta. Hey, that's the land of Jermaine. Well, welcome to the broadcast. What can I help you with today?
Thanks for having me, Mark. I wanted to call and bring up, maybe talk about a little bit about that Calgary judge that claimed he didn't have to prove jurisdiction to that gentleman who was in his traffic court.
David Gates.
That's the guy.
That's the guy. You know, it actually worked pretty well to put that scumbag Steve hat on him. So,
yeah, absolutely. I think, it's an unfortunate rigging of the game, really. I mean, his statement's true, based on the way that they've established the court structure. So it's not even really that he said anything that was wrong. I actually think it's the gentleman who went there that misunderstood where he was. And this is respective of Canada, Mark. I mean, the way the court structure is in America, I can't speak to that because I'm not familiar.
It's the same. It's the same whether you're in the U.S., Canada, Australia, England, New Zealand. It's the same. Some of the phrases are different, but it's the same thing. They all believe the same damn thing. In fact, I have many call of shames with bureaucrats, and it's the same in Canada. If you're physically in Canada, then the laws apply. If you're physically in England, then the laws of Parliament apply. If you're physically in Australia, so it's all the same basis.
Well, so here they say that they unilaterally will apply the law subject to limitation by the Charter. And so the argument that he's wanting to make, that he's not bound by the particular statute in which they're trying to charge him with, is a valid argument that he can make. But when he walks into a traffic court and appears and starts telling the guy that he doesn't have jurisdiction over him, his actions and what he's saying aren't congruent, because they define appearing as formally submitting yourself to the jurisdiction of the court. So by showing up there, you're giving them control, and you're entering the proceeding, and that's a presumption that if you don't rebut, that's why when he says that, I don't have to prove anything to you. You're here. Don't come here and take it to this other. We have different levels of court in Canada, and that administrative tribunal cannot hear or make charter determinations because it's not a court of competent jurisdiction. It's an administrative tribunal.
I don't know if that's necessarily true. However, we put right in the paperwork that we're not appearing, we're participating on a threat, duress, and coercion. So we make it very clear.
So in Canada,
it's not.
They offer you a rule. So they figure the fairness is done through the rules. And so there's a rule that allows you to move the issue to the court that can hear the subject matter that you're wishing to bring up. But the court you're in can't hear it. So if you appear there, you're showing up under their jurisdiction. There's a rule available for you that you can say, hey, I can't actually talk to you about anything here because you're not competent to talk about it. This needs to be moved over here. And that's your initial first step. So the reason I wanted to call was because the Socratic method is valid for exposing the fraud, and it'll work every time. Whether they railroad the guy or not, it definitely will expose it. But if we really want to win, we want to use the mechanism that is the court to get remedies, right? I think that's, like, generally speaking, most people are out there. They're, if you invalidate the court as a whole completely out of the gate, then you've destroyed your opportunity for a remedy. And that's the nature of de facto and that de jure power argument and all that bullshit. I mean, generally speaking, people accept the fact that we want a mechanism to, like, deal with criminals, protect property and people, right? That's like, so whether that's de jure or de facto, it doesn't really matter. It's in play. And so I think we need to use it to defend ourselves. Because in Canada, I do believe the court system they'll recognize the argument you're trying to make, Mark. There's a piece of case law called Eldorado versus Regina, or whoever it is. Eldorado is the short citation for it. And in there, he states that if they're going to charge you under a statute that doesn't have a common law equivalent, they have to prove that you're bound by the statute. And that's what you're asking for. What evidence do you have that I'm bound by the statute? And in the case of a traffic ticket, when he says it's on the ticket, if the guy had a license, some type where he applied voluntarily to get a privilege from the state, they have the evidence. It's right there.
Well, that's easily rebutted, though. It's
I understand your position that you'll say, like, you're forcing me to do it. But if you've never made that clear before, You know what I mean? Like, so if when you signed up for your driver's license, unless you went in there and you're like, I'm only signing up for this under these conditions, and you like wrote it on the application form, then you could have something to point to when you come to the court to say, hey, like, I didn't get this voluntarily. I'm getting this because it's being
I don't think you
imposed on me.
have to do that. It's easy to show that it's compulsory. It's right in their own code. And what I typically do is ask them if their position is that the driver's license is evidence proving the Constitution applies. And sometimes they actually say yes. And then I just follow it up with how so, and then they almost universally have backed off and said that the driver's license is not evidence. So that's why we're able to get them to drop that. And then now we're at step one again. We're back at first base.
I think the reason they back off on it is because they don't want to talk about the fraud they're committing that creates the circle of proof. Because if you have a driver's license, you have either some form of residency or citizenship in this country, in Canada specifically. Because you can't get it without a birth certificate or a similar type of identity document. So that you're a member in the game. You're governed by all their statutory law. The moment that happens, because whether it's through naturalization or the oath, you've sworn to the good governance of Canada and to follow all the rules. So specifically, when you apply for a license, you are already governed by the code, and then you went and voluntarily applied for the thing, which brought you under this particular subset of rules, statute X, Y, or Z. In this case, the Highway and Traffic Safety Act.
Well, yeah, those are certainly the presumptions that are in place. I know that they've actually said, well, we're basing it on, well, because he had a license and he had a Canada address, we're able to presume, and they'll use that word, we're able to presume that he is a resident and that the laws do apply, and that's the evidence. To say, but okay, and you object and you bring it back to, well, doesn't that legal conclusion hinge on whether the laws apply because you're physically in Canada? So, well, yeah. Okay, well, now we're right back at first base, because the original proposition that we're challenging is, is that just because I'm physically in Canada, your rules apply to me.
Yeah, well, we were moving pretty quick, Mark, because I know you're on a limited time, and there's a whole number of presumptions that for us to really have the debate effectively or try and understand the system, we should probably clarify. So maybe even just courts as a structure. Do you think that there is a valid logical purpose to have a court?
Do I think there's a valid purpose to having a court, a political court? No.
No, like a court of law that deals with the protection of people, property, criminal sanction.
Well, I think if you have a system that isn't based on violence and a prison system, and you have a system of a court type system that is consistent with the end, then yeah, I think you can have legitimate courts or arbitration and mediation, of course. So
where do you define the line in harm? Can you physically restrain somebody who's violent? Well, so let's say there is somebody violent and they're assaulting someone. Can you use force to stop them and
it's them? Defensive force. So I think defensive force is always morally justified.
Okay. And now if it's after the fact, so I get assaulted and I go to the court to say, hey, like this person, beat me within an inch of my life and I know who it was and I know where they live. Is it still defensive force at that point if you go there and physically take them and bring them before a court to answer to the charge?
I think there's disagreement on that. And I would say that as long as I would first do it non-violently or without force.
Invite them to come.
Yeah, and right. That's what the beauty of the way things are now. You can use you can ostracize, you can publicize what they've done, provided you have the evidence, which could be a strong incentive to participate in a proceeding and to make the victim whole again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree. So I guess if we're going to go on the premise that we believe there's a system that should be in place for the enforcement and protection of people and property, which is it really is just a direct link to the criminal law. If you're going to have criminal law sanction and you're going to take away people's liberty because the punishment, let's say, for some of these crimes is, see, but you're saying without a prison.
Well, so no, that's not, well, let me clarify. Mm-hmm. The system isn't in place by way of a prison system, meaning you are not using the prison system to collect the money and to impose the system on society in a violent manner. But I believe we can have the prisons to separate people like Cheryl Hardy from the rest of society. I believe that, yes. I think people like Cheryl Hardy and Stephen Myrie should be forcibly separated from society. Okay.
So we agree that confinement is a available punishment, I guess. So the next distinction then that needs to be made is the difference between regulatory infractions and criminal law. And that's where the real issue is here with when you come to Canada and you want to make jurisdictional arguments. I shared that piece of case law in our Skype chat there, El Dorado, where it states, and I'll just read it. It says, where the only source of the unlawfulness is a statute, however, the analysis is entirely different. Reference to a statute is necessary for criminal responsibility in Canada apart from contempt of court, because Section 8 of the Criminal Code precludes any conviction for an offense at common law. If a person commits an act prohibited by statute and the Attorney General seeks to prosecute for violation of that statute, the preliminary question is whether that must be asked is whether the person is bound by the statute. If not, the person simply does not commit a violation of the statute. The situation is not that a person is immune from prosecution, like they say about OPCA and Freeman and all this stuff, even though there has been an unlawful act. Rather, there has been no unlawful act under the statute. And so that context that he's giving there, that he's talking about, is the argument that everyone's trying to make. Where does it say that this applies to me? And
no, that's not. Whoa. That's not the argument. The argument is, where's the evidence to support the prosecution's claim that just because I'm physically in Canada, that your laws apply?
They'll say it just comes from their claimed right as a sovereign body. So they'll say that we can unilaterally apply this unless you can relate it in some way to rights protected in the Charter. Otherwise, we can litigate in any way we want, and we even suggest that we can write laws that don't respect certain things that are supposed to be protected.
True, and that's why we respond with, so it's because you say so, not because there's any evidence to prove that from the prosecution. And so one of the objections I have, objection, is that because you say so or because the prosecution's evidence does? So we are able to separate and show that it really is just because they say so.
But in most cases, is it really? If they've participated in all the things, if they've never suggested or said when they're applying for these privileges that I'm doing this under duress, threat, and coercion, or that...
do you really have to? Do you really? I mean, because we already know the driver's license is compulsory, whether you say you're doing it on a threat, duress, and coercion or not. We already know that filing a tax return with the CRA is compulsory, whether you say it or not. So I guess it helps to.
It's only compulsory if you intend to engage in the privilege of driving.
No.
There's other rights that are protected, like the enjoyment of the use of property. And if you didn't get a license, you could congruently make that argument that this Traffic Act doesn't apply to me.
Well, no, they think the Traffic Act applies whether you get the license or not, and they've even told me that. But we're out of time, and I'm going to try to get to some of the other callers that we have. So, call the Wednesday broadcast so we can continue the discussion, all right?
For sure, Mark.
I appreciate the call. Adam in Alberta. It's been a while. He's been very patient today, I know. So let's get to Infamous Wit. Welcome back to the big broadcast.
But thanks for taking me on, Mark.
Punk?
I'm not blaming you for anything, by the way.
No, nobody.
Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
You wouldn't by chance be playing live tonight anywhere in Mesa?
Would I be playing live anywhere in Mesa?
Yeah, I thought you had a garage band that you'd like to jam with live sometimes.
We tried. It's been a while since I've been able to jam with the guys. I've been trying to get it back together, but no, I had gone down to do an open mic night down in by Milano's on Main Street, but they've got a few guys there that don't understand what open mic means, and so I had to do the walk of shame and grab my guitar in front of everybody and leave because I just couldn't spend so many hours waiting for a couple of these fat guys to finally relinquish the stage so that I could do some jamming. I am still looking for a place to do the show live once a month, which would be nice. And hey, if you're aware of an open mic night where they're playing blues type music, yeah, let me know. I'd definitely like to check that out.
Right on. I called when I tuned in when I heard about a young man. I must say, man's inhumanity to their own humanity could not break my heart any more than what I heard a guy lamenting about having to pay $700 for a month for his own brethren, whether or not it was a fraud or not. It is his flesh, and whatever. I just wanted to say that just shocked me. $8,400 a year plus your tax refund being taken from you isn't much to ask to take care of your fellow human being, whether you wanted her to have your child or not. It is your child. It's your responsibility. You knew what you were doing when you were doing it, and you knew the results could happen.
She was actually on birth. She actually had told him, and they had an agreement not to have kids, and she was on birth control. And I will say that
right, but
nobody should have to be forced. No one should have to be forced to actually do what they can to help take care of their own children. I agree with that. Yeah, I'll say that every day. If it's your child, you should do what you can to help take care of them. Of course.
Right. No, I shouldn't even have to ask. Hence, man's inhumanity to their own humanity never ceases to blow my mind. But I'd like to tell my fellow Republicans to stop calling a man yearning to breathe free and illegal, in spite of U.S. law. Please don't use that pejorative. I wish you wouldn't call officers of the law that have a conscience just like Lark and Rose and think that they're doing something decent and right for our society. I wish you wouldn't just brand them all as criminals. They do exist in our world that we live in, and they're not all bad people. So I wish you wouldn't refer to them as all criminals, because I think you do your cause for a no-state project and anarchism a disservice by branding people that are your political opponents with pejoratives. I'm just saying, Mark.
Well, okay. Well, in my defense, I always say to treat them the way we want to be treated, to always be kind and professional to them. I do say that they're part of a criminal organization, and I have mentioned that not all of them are bad. In fact, when we do have a report of one that's doing the right thing, I will mention it. So you can have good, otherwise good people be part of a criminal organization and not carry out the violence that some of the others do. So, but you have heard me say to always treat others the way you want to be treated.
Right, but you just used the words again that I asked you. I think you should reconsider your rhetoric. Again, you can call it a criminal organization all you want, but I'm just saying on behalf of and this isn't an appeal to the mob or an appeal to the majority, but it's just a fact. Just like your parents are your parents and you didn't get to choose them. You were born into a world where there are cops, and they exist. And if you want to call it a corrupt organization, especially particular police departments, I'm game with that. But police aren't going anywhere anytime soon, and I'm not seeing any anarchism revolution coming to rid the world of police. And they do serve a good function in our society. And I wish you'd stop branding them criminals. Just like I said, I wish my fellow Republicans would stop calling my fellow decent human beings illegals because they didn't like how they came here. Which is another topic for another day.
Yeah, well, but I give my reasons, though. I'm not just branding it a criminal organization because I'm a hateful anarchist. And I've said it at least once on the show.
Didn't call you hateful.
No, I didn't.
Call you hateful.
I didn't. I wasn't referring to you, but I did say at least one time on the show that the reason why I call them a criminal organization is because they force everyone to pay them. And it's not like we don't want police officers or that particular service. We just want that service to be provided in a means or a manner consistent with the stated end. And that, so we still want the service, we just don't want a prison system and being forced to pay for it. And I think a lot of the abuse that comes, and that otherwise good people who join the police force, the reason why there's so much corruption and abuse is because it's the nature of the system, because they don't have any real responsibility to the people who they are supposed to be protecting, because they are forcing us to pay them. So I do give the evidence to support.
I think the problem with the system is the problem with every system and every group that you're ever going to be a member of. There are bad people in every group you're a member of, period.
Yeah,
and
but
when,
this gives them
people have power to assert over other fellow human beings, and they're bad people. They don't care how they use and abuse their power. They're going to actually seek more power. Again, I'm with you I'm against bad cops, but the notion of cops and police is not criminal in its...
Well, the organization, I got to put you on hold.
Genesis.
We're up against the break. My name is Marc Stevens, and the thing is, yes, there are bad people in every organization, it seems, and that's one of the primary reasons not to have states and governments, because we shouldn't be giving them a platform to cause even more harm than they normally would be able to do, and then give them immunity on top of it. Welcome back to the show. I'm sorry, I'm low on time, so I wanted to give you see if you had any other questions or comments.
I don't. I actually called in to lament about the caller I was listening to, and I hope he heard me out, and I hope that he actually realizes that he has a responsibility to his child, whether he wanted it or not. It's now his responsibility. You have a human responsibility to your fellow human that happens to be yours to take care of him and leave the state out of it. You shouldn't have to have a dude from the state tell you to give your non-significant other any more monies to take care of your kid. Peace be with you, Mark, and thanks for taking me on, and have a good day.
Yeah, well, I just wanted a question I wanted to ask you.
Shoot.
Isn't it fair that if you do have a organization that is criminal in nature, isn't it fair to describe the individuals that make up that criminal enterprise as criminals?
I don't believe the genesis of that organization you're referring to as being criminal and approximate. So that's a loaded question. Of course, I can't give you an answer that will satisfy you.
Well, if you're forcing people to give you money and forcing people to pay you, wouldn't that be criminal in nature?
I don't object to the collective outright, as you do in principle. Again, we're born into this world. I'm forced to pay taxes. I didn't consent to pay taxes, but there are actually many things I agree that everybody should have to pay into, like a big rock that clogs the river and turns into a big lake, and all of a sudden millions of people have drinking water at their disposal. I'm referring to the Hoover Dam, which I never got to talk to you about. That's a much bigger subject that I never was satisfied with your answer because we didn't have enough time back in the day. If you remember that conversation, you're referring to the collective, so to speak, is what I will call it. Because, yes, I don't consider it criminal that you have to pay taxes to cops for police stations to be built in your neighborhood, whether you want it there or not. Nothing's perfect in this world. Nothing. There's no pure, good solution to any of the world's problems. There's always costs and benefits. There's always gives and takes that we have to, as a civil society and fellow human beings, come to agree with each other, whether we like it or not.
So do you agree that the only way for these services to be provided is to force people and even imprison them? Well,
again, you're loading us. So I don't know anybody that's been in prison because they refuse to pay their taxes. I know there are people that do, but you're making it sound like this is a problem we're living with. No, the problem is bad cops, not the fact that the police stations and you're having to have to pay taxes in the first place. I don't consider that a bad thing. What you have to pay taxes for, I agree with you. There are things that you and I both are going to agree you shouldn't have to. I shouldn't have to. Nobody should have to. But when it comes down to basic protect and serve, I'm game with you being forced to pay taxes just as I will myself. Again, there's no perfect solution to a perfect word.
So even though, and we're not looking for perfect or utopia, so it's not a problem that the means conflicts with the end, so that the end being to protect life, liberty, and property, you have no problem with the means actually violating that. So the means justifies the end. I'm sorry.
I don't take offense to it as you do, and I get where you're coming from. I completely disagree.
Okay, so
it's nothing personal.
Real quick. So, because I want to try to get one last caller. So, the end with you does justify the means.
Yes, absolutely. And we have a conflict of visions. You've asked the correct question, and I've answered completely in contradistinction to what you believe.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. You believe
I don't believe I don't believe in a no state project. No disrespect. I've already said I'm not an anarchist.
I get it. You just said that the end justifies the means, and that
yes,
really is an
absolutely.
insight. It's an insight into your moral convictions.
No,
though.
Don't go there. Please don't go there, because I'm not going to insult you and say that your moral compass is broken. Mine.
I didn't say broken.
I'm not going to tell you that your moral compass is broken. Well, please don't tell me that mine is.
I didn't say it was broken. I just think it's. I think that you've got some inconsistency.
That's what you're implying.
No, I'm not implying. I'm saying straight out. I think you have an inconsistency in your moral principles. And okay, I think
how am I immoral?
You have an inconsistency because you're saying the end justifies the means, so that the means don't have to be consistent with the end, and that's contradictory in and of itself. That is contradictory.
May I interrupt, because I hate to bring this up, because it's the only beef I've ever had with you, but the very first call I ever made to Liberty Radio Network, your sidekick posted on your website, because I made a big splash. And people were horrified that I defended the nuking of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The ends justified the means. And you can, with your own God-given eyes and God-given brain, unless you are like absolutely anti-war to begin with, you would be able to say, yeah, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan and the Far East are way better off now than they were the day before. Fat man and little boys were dropped on
even though the emperor, according to the Allied commander at the time, MacArthur, said that they were ready to give up. That's right, something.
If the instant they did give up, Mark, guess who stopped dropping bombs?
They were willing to give up.
The team that had bombs dropped on them to begin with, that didn't start it. And as soon as the bad guys surrendered, the good guys surrendered too, Mark. If they had surrendered the day before Nagasaki happened, if they had surrendered before Hiroshima had happened, Hiroshima and Nagasaki would have never happened. Now, we already know that way more people were killed before both those bombs were dropped. And the evil empire of Japan and Hirohito and his warlord gang thugs there actually were running that evil empire. If they had surrendered any time before Hiroshima and Nagasaki, just like the United States did when they did surrender, we stopped killing people. Ends justified the means. Now, I'd love to talk to you more about that, because it's such a bigger. It's not fair to bring up a big subject and expect either one of us to make our peace in seconds.
That's true. I do need. Well, give me a call on another broadcast so we can do that, because I'm going to try to get one more call. Okay.
Yeah, right on. I already parted ways with you, and I thank you for asking me a question. I appreciate that very much, and for you taking me on civilly and not branding me as being some immoral, sickening kid that wants to murder people. Somebody that I think that posted stuff on your website actually does believe, because he listens to liars and losers. You're not one of them.
All right, well, have a good day. I thank you. I appreciate the call. My name is Marc Stevens. You're listening to the No State Project here on LRN.FM. And I'm really sorry I wasn't able to get to Carrie and other callers for much longer, but I will be live on Wednesday. So till then, salut.